So, Lee Harmon. What's the name of the business?
Harmon Small Business Solutions.
Harmon Small Business Solutions. So, in addition to Lee and I doing a one-to-one and being part of a networking group, I'm also a client. I don't know if you know that. Ina and I set up an LLC and everything for purchasing properties, and Lee put it all together for us. So, I wasn't a part of it other than some signatures and everything along those lines. I let her kind of quarterback the entire operation, but a client here.
Very nice.
Before we got started, you'd mentioned about tax deadlines and everything along those lines. Can you tell us just a little bit about what you do, the bulk of your business, and everything like that?
Yeah, my baseline business is the bookkeeping. That's the year-round activity, and then I do the tax returns as well, which is obviously there's the spring deadline and then the extension deadline in the fall. So a couple times of the year where life gets a little bit busier with those deadlines.
Sure. I find a lot of people extend their taxes. What do you think the reason is for that?
I think people just don't want to deal with it. They procrastinate. It's like
Is there anything strategic behind it?
sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes. I mean, if you've got businesses and stuff that take more time to get returns in and stuff, if you've got, items that are going to feed your return. So a lot of times K-1s and stuff won't come in until summertime. So it's hard to do a personal return before the K-1s come in. So
I see.
So
As a lender, I have to look at tax returns all the time, and I don't need to know as much as you, but I need to be able to read them, digest them, do all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And I'm really surprised at the amount of people that don't do their taxes when they're due initially. They always extend, and then we're looking at extensions. And I find that the attitude that I kind of feel is almost as if they have some sort of strategy behind why their taxes aren't no, of course my taxes aren't done. I extended them. Like, why would I get them done on time?
Yeah.
And I always wonder what that strategy is.
And they're really, I don't see a strategy around that because the payments are due April 15th, whether you file or not.
Mm-hmm.
You can extend and not make your payments till later, but you're collecting interest and penalties on them anyway. So, unless you're paying up ahead of time, you're still going to collect interest and penalties. So you're not saving yourself anything by extending. You're not really, I guess you're keeping your money in the bank a little bit longer, but unless you're making more in interest than what you're paying the government in interest, it's not going to really pay out for anything.
And I would envision you'd have to be making quite a bit more in interest for it to really make sense.
Exactly, yeah.
So you'd have to be in a bracket of wealth that I would envision most people don't find themselves in.
And typically those people, they just are able to write the check whenever they want to write the check anyway. So, why they hold it, I don't really understand either.
Well, and this is what I love about doing, these one-to-ones and these interviews on these podcasts, because money is one of those things that I have identified as a topic that people do not want to admit that they don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, with so much information on the internet, TikToks, all this other stuff, I watch some of these videos where, if you do this and you for some reason, if you buy a G-Wagon, a Mercedes G-Wagon, you're going to save all this money because you can write it off on as an expense for a business vehicle, and because it weighs X amount of pounds or something. I mean, there's just so much bullshit out there.
There's definitely. I have people come to me with things like that all the time, and it's just like, no. There's a lot of misinformation out there.
Right. So that's what's beautiful about this. I love giving people an opportunity to kind of troll, right? Because they never want to just call and say, hey, turns out I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that's what's been really good about these. So, we kind of covered the whole reason behind extending taxes, and we're almost into October, so taxes are due for anyone who has extended. We've identified there's not a major strategy to it. What are some other things that you kind of run into when it comes to, clients with taxes and things like that, that if you could just kind of dispel any rumor right now, what would it be?
I think one of the big things is, especially business owners, they believe they can write off all their vacations and things like that. And, it's the reality is you can write off the business portion, but if you're truly on vacation, how much of it's really business?
Right.
So, but people try. I mean, they try, but, it's one of those things. I just, I try to work with my clients as much as possible, give them the benefit of the doubt, but I always warn them that if,
there's an audit,
IRS comes knocking, it's going to be very hard to justify this.
Yeah. So what does that look like? Have you ever had a client where the IRS has come knocking and I would envision you have to get involved a little bit, right?
Oh, definitely, yeah. So, there's three certifications that will allow you to talk to the IRS on a client's behalf. So there's a CPA, an EA, and a lawyer. So those are the only three designations the IRS will allow to talk to them on behalf of someone else, on behalf of a client. So, so if you have a tax preparer, you probably want them to have one of those three designations so that they can represent you, because you don't have to have them to prepare taxes.
How many of those do you obtain or hold?
I have the EA, so yeah.
EA stands for?
Enrolled agent.
Okay.
So you can test for it, similar to a CPA, taking the test to get your CPA, or you can work for the IRS for 5 years to get that designation. So that's a true IRS designation. So they like that one a lot when it comes to talking to them, because they feel you are following all the IRS guidelines, because that's who really puts that one in place. So
I see. So when those audits happen, how painful are they really?
Anymore, most of them are mail audits. So, they'll send you a letter, they'll send you corrections, and typically you just put together a response on paper and send it back in. So most of them are mail anymore. If it gets deeper, it can turn into a live session. I haven't run into one of those yet. Mine have all been through the mail. So, anywhere from a simple one-page letter to 50 or 60 pages of documents to validate what you're trying to validate and send it back to them. So,
do you find that most people follow the rules and therefore you don't run into too many issues? And,
I mean,
there has to be a horror story that you can.
There's a little bit of gray in everything, right?
Yeah.
So, but we definitely don't cross any of the black and white lines. Obviously in the gray areas you have a little bit of leeway, and we make best judgments in there. But in general, people, will trust me and take my word for it, and I
hope so. You're the pro.
try to keep them in the clear. And so, I've really only dealt with a couple audits, and they've just been paper audits. And a lot of them have even been around, where it's a divorce case and the other parent tried to claim a child, so they already show up in the system, and different things like that. So one thing I have noticed is there's a lot more little items being flagged and a lot more little items that the IRS is sending letters out on. I think this is the influx of all the new agents, and they don't know as much about the details. So we're getting a lot of simpler notices that are coming out and stuff. So that's one thing for people to watch out for.
So I've got a big question for you that I get asked all the time, and I love that you're here because you're qualified to answer it. Capital gains.
Yes.
I get this all the time with properties, and everybody is always fearful of paying taxes on capital gains. And, I know the short answer, but I really want the detailed answer. So if I purchase a property and I end up selling it, when am I subject to capital gains? How long do I need to own the home? What's it going to cost me?
So on the home, less than 2 years is short term. Over 2 years is long term. And you basically get $250,000 tax-free per person if it's over 2 years.
Got it.
Under 2 years, you can prorate it, so you won't pay full capital gains. It's prorated inside that window.
Explain that so that, for those that are out there that.
So if you own it 1 year,
Yeah.
you basically could get 125 before you start paying taxes, because you're halfway through that 2 year window.
Gotcha.
So it's prorated.
That's interesting.
way.
I never knew that. So that's great, because
And there are some caveats around that, though.
Sure.
It's typically got to be related to a job move or something that was kind of more of a forced sale for some personal reason. So you've got to have some reasoning behind it. You can't just flip a house every year and get that benefit.
Gotcha. But after 2 years,
Then yeah. So if it's a married couple, if you gain more than $500,000 on it, you're paying taxes on whatever was over the $500,000. If it's an individual, it's anything over the $250,000.
And in Austin, unless you have a multi-million-dollar property, chances are you're not going to hit that $500,000.
Well, you'd be surprised, just because there's a lot of people that have owned their homes for 10, 15, 20 years.
I see.
And the market has blown up a lot more recently. So,
Okay.
you've got a lot of people that have homes, back when you could buy them for 150,000 that now are selling for 6, 7, 800,000. So
That's a good point. And
Yeah.
then so after 2 years, we are hit with long-term capital gains, which I would envision is a much lower percentage.
it's a
than
15,
short-term.
15%.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I mean, that's great information.
Yeah.
That's great information. The other one that I run into all the time that's a big fear for my clients is gift funds.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an example, I'm purchasing a property. My parents are going to give me a down payment of $100,000, and I watch parents, without consulting me, do a lot of crazy stuff
Yeah.
to try to hide this money or whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish because they have fear of paying taxes on in this scenario, said $100,000
Yeah.
that they're giving their son or daughter for a down payment. What are the tax implications for somebody who's giving gift funds to a family member to purchase a home?
So the responsibility lies on the gifter, so it would rely on the parents.
Yep.
You have currently, I believe it's around $4 million is your lifetime gift allotment before it becomes taxable. So really, it's just a reporting mechanism for that 100,000, and then the IRS is basically going to track that and see how much you gift over your life, and then
$4 million in gifts is when it will actually become taxable.
right. And so a lot of times in those situations, it's really not going to hit until it's a state settlement time or something like that. But if they've already given you a couple million, then you just have that much less to be given through the estate before it hits taxes. And
Well,
things
the
like that.
irony is that from my experience, the people who are trying to do all of the wonky stuff are the ones that, with all due respect, are never going to gift $4 million.
Well, and I think it's just a misunderstanding. So people think they're
course.
having to, pay on those gifts, and really it's just a tracking mechanism. It's just a simple form you file with your return to say, hey, I gifted this, and this is to who, so that it can be tracked and looked at for the long term and the big, basically inheritance tax items. So
And you would think that they would contact the professionals, but
yeah.
TikTok's the new god.
Exactly. And before I forget, circling back to the home long-term gains,
Sure.
you do have to live in that home 2 of the previous 5 years. If it's a rental property, then you're going to pay gains on it no matter what.
I'm glad you brought that up. So, for example, you buy the home, you live in it for 5 years, right? And then all of a sudden you turn it into a rental property, rent it out for 5 years.
Right.
It no longer meets that short-term,
Correct.
that long-term capital gains tax. You're now going to be taxed as a
gain. It's just
a gain because now it's
it'll
a
still be
rental
long term, but you're going to be taxed on the entire amount.
Sure.
So unless you move back into that house, say for 2 years before you sell it. So
good advice.
Yeah. So
Good
you
advice.
just have to lived in it 2 of the previous 5 years to qualify.
So my number one clip right now, I believe, in terms of views, is with the financial advisor Keith Powell,
Yeah.
who kind of took a little bit of a dive into 1031 exchanges
Okay.
and exactly what those are and how those work. And it's one of those things that seems to be more and more popular. And I get a lot of questions, not only what they are, how do they work, are they for investment properties only? Can I do this if I have a primary residency and I'm going to sell it and then I'm going to rent for a little while? So can we unpack a little bit what 1031 exchanges look like?
So 1031s are basically rollovers. So if you
To defer, Keith says.
Yes.
Defer taxes.
Yes.
Not avoid,
So
defer.
you're pushing them to the future sale of the new residence,
Right.
basically. So it's back in a while ago. It was almost like a 1031 on your primary. You didn't pay taxes as long as you bought a house as least as expensive or more than the one you just sold,
Okay.
right? So that was an old strategy, an old tax law. 1031s are kind of similar to that. So if you want to upgrade or at least buy equal to what you're selling, you won't have to pay any taxes on that property.
Sure.
But you have to make sure you set it up properly. It has to be set up as a 1031 prior to closing, all that. You can't back into it. So it's all got to be forethought, not afterthought.
Sure.
So, because
Do you do 1031 exchanges?
I have done a few 1031s, yes.
Okay.
So it's just a form that goes with the tax return that basically shows, sold a property but repurchased another property. And I always see it in investment properties. I don't know that it relates to primary residence at all.
Okay.
That's because you've got the other long-term tax breaks on the primary
yeah.
residence. So it's mostly an investment property strategy, and yeah, it's typically where people are upgrading. So you take your $300,000 beach condo and want to move up to a $500,000 beach condo. You sell one, but you do it through the 1031 closing process, and everything will roll forward. And it just all of the biggest thing about it is making sure you have someone that properly tracks the basis on your properties and stuff, because that's going to determine what your gains are in the end. So any improvements you put into it, anything like that, should all be tracked so that you're keeping your basis accurate.
And so going back to what we talked about with capital gains, you'd mentioned like an older tax code where you're taking the money that you're making on your property and utilizing that for the purchase of your new one.
Mm-hmm.
Is that considered capital gains? So, for example, I mean, you mentioned somebody who lives in a home for like 10 years, right?
Yep.
They purchased their property for maybe $200,000. They've lived in the home for 10 years. Now it's worth $1 million, something crazy, right?
Right.
They have $800,000 worth of equity that they've accumulated over 10 years. If I take that $800,000 and I buy a $1.5 million home with it and take the $800,000 and apply it towards my down payment, am I taxed on that $800,000?
Well, you'd be taxed on $300,000.
Okay.
So the first $500,000, since you've been there 10 years,
I
would be free. So it'd just be 15% on the $300,000.
And that's $250 per person, or
per person.
Okay, so that's assuming I got somebody else that I've bought the home with or live with. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
if you were single, then the first $250 would be tax free, and then the next $550.
Even though I'm putting it into my other property.
When it's primary residence, that's how it works now.
And again, at long term, it's 15%.
So the only thing I would say on that is if you did a $100,000 remodel on that home, though.
Okay.
Your $200,000 home now has a basis of $300,000.
Interesting.
So, that's where keeping track of all the remodels and projects and expenses on the home,
Sure,
to make sure that basis is accurate. So it's not just the purchase price, but it's everything you put into it.
So this is exactly how hiring somebody that knows what they're doing to prepare your taxes makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I run into a lot of people that do TurboTax and all of these other things, and I'll be honest, I've never done it myself. It scares the shit out of me, though, because I think this just doesn't seem, you're messing with your money. And, of course, if you have real estate involved and things like that, I guess if maybe you work at Whataburger, TurboTax might be a good fit.
Well, and that's, I've had clients come to me and say, well, can you guarantee getting me a bigger refund? And I'm like, can I guarantee it? No. If you do everything properly, you should get the same numbers I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't guarantee I can get you a bigger refund, but I'm going to make sure that you're going to get what you're supposed to get.
Sure, and there might be things that you're aware of. I mean, we just knocked out like 4 of them that I can guarantee you that 2/3 of the people out there aren't aware of.
Yeah.
So, I think that right there is a huge value add.
Yeah. And, I ask a lot of questions, and I look at your history and make sure you're not missing forms. Those are the types of things that we spend the time on and try to make sure we get it right.
Right on. Well, what else do we need to know? What's the public service announcement to future past, present clients?
Be organized.
Okay.
It just makes your life a whole lot easier. I think that's the biggest thing I face is people trying to come up with documents and trying to find stuff.
Is that because they can't find them, or maybe because they don't exist?
I think they come in the mail and they throw them off in a pile and they just misplace a lot of stuff.
What's an example of something like that you see a lot of?
Retirement account statements, interest dividend statements, you get statements, a lot of them anymore, they're paperless. So if you don't go into your account and pull it down, you don't just receive it in the mail.
Sure.
So, people just, a lot of these are set it and forget it kind of items, and they just aren't in there. And so when it comes to time to pull together their tax items, if it's not laying there in front of them, they're not always, aware of where to go get them and what all is needed. So
it's all coming together now, because that, to me, is probably why people are extending their taxes.
A lot of them, yep. A lot of them, everybody's busy in life. They don't want to take the time. Yeah, they don't want to take the time to sit down and gather this stuff up and send it off to people and stuff. And unfortunately, I don't have access to all your accounts to go in and pull all your stuff. It's,
right.
That's a little.
You mean people want their privacy?
Yeah. Well, and it's a little beyond my reach. Yeah.
Sure.
So I don't want a list of 45 passwords and accounts from all my clients. That's a little more than I want to do too. So
I gotcha. Well, in addition to just chatting about your business, what you do, and all of that, everybody I have on here, one of the things I focus on is just kind of like entrepreneurship, right? Everyone who's on here is basically self-employed, is running their own business, and everyone who comes on here seems really knowledgeable about what they do. They're very professional. They've got years of experience, and
Yeah.
I think that anybody that would seek their services would be, lucky
Right.
to work with them. But the one thing that seems to be the hardest part of being an entrepreneur is, how do you get the clients? How do you get new business? And
Yeah.
I always ask, what's been working for you? What hasn't worked for you? What seems to be the thing that is kind of at forefront of your mind that you're doing to gain new business?
So, I mean, I kind of fell into this. I mean, I didn't go out with any intention to start this business or anything else. It's kind of my third career in life, and it happened by just working with some people in the industry and picking up a few clients, and then it was more on word of mouth and networking that has really grown my business.
Okay.
So I get a lot of referrals from current clients, which to me speaks volumes.
Sure,
I think that's the absolute best way to gain solid business. The networks I attend have been great, and
Networking
I've
groups, you mean?
built a lot of good relationships in there that have sent me a lot of business as well. But then, I think in this industry especially, communication is a huge key. There's a lot of accountants and stuff out there that are just very busy and they don't respond very well, and I try to take the time to at least twice a day check email and send responses and do those types of things. So, communication, open communication is a big key, because this isn't a topic that everybody really wants to talk about. And,
Right. It's true.
And so the transparency, I think, goes a long ways. And just, do what you say you're going to do and be upfront with people and set the right expectations, and I think things will go pretty well for you.
How do you stay
So,
top of mind with clients? I mean, is there anything you're doing to say, hey, I'm here, or social media or anything along those lines?
I really don't. My tax business is growing faster than I ever anticipated, because it's one of those industries where more people are leaving it than coming into it. So I get calls all the time. Hey, my accountant has disappeared. I don't know where they're at. Can you
What do
help
you
me?
think that's because of?
I think some of it's the tax laws are changing so rigorously every year. Some of the older school people are just tired of trying to keep up with it.
Okay.
And it's just one of those industries that's aging out. There's a lot more age in the industry than there is new blood coming into it. So, I mean, I got into it at a late stage of life, but even with that, I'm not one of the old people in the business. So there's a lot of people in their 60s and 70s that are still doing this, and they're just aging out. And the young kids would much rather go the corporate route with accounting than go into private practice and tax preparation. So,
Gotcha. Do you think that there is any place, I've asked everybody that comes in here business-wise, I mean, do you have any concerns about, AI, for example, that, I know things like TurboTax, I've never utilized it, but, to be able to plug in documentation, answer a couple of questions, and then they're just going to spit out a return. I mean, is there any fear of that, causing any issues for you in your career?
No, not really. I think AI can be very beneficial. It can take some of the monotonous stuff off of our plates, and take care of some of it. But until AI can truly reason through items and look at things a lot more holistically than true or false, it's not going to be there yet, because there's just too much interpretation in these documents and
gray
industry.
area, as you called it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But do you utilize any kind of AI for yourself right now?
I'm researching it. So
Okay.
as I've been growing and stuff, trying to get a little bit of bandwidth back, I've been, once I get through this deadline, I've got a few demos scheduled and a few things to hopefully help organize some stuff and replace some of my spreadsheets and take care of some stuff for me. So
I gotcha. So with the tax business growing at a rate that you can hardly keep up with, I mean, are you taking on new clients now?
I am. I haven't reached my peak yet. I'm just getting there a lot faster than I anticipated. I really plan to grow this is my second year
Okay.
truly doing taxes on my own. I've worked with CPAs and I've worked on taxes for many years in the past, gaining my experience and stuff, but this is my second year doing it on my own, 100%. And my projection or my hope was to build up to roughly 100 clients over about a 5-year period. add 20 clients a year, 20 not clients, but 20 returns. A lot of people have business and personal.
So who's the ideal client right now for anybody out there that is, watching and kind of saying like, hey, this guy seems like he's got it together. Maybe I'm a good fit. What are you really looking for?
I love entrepreneurs, love small businesses. My mix is roughly 50-50 between businesses and personal returns. A lot of the personal returns have Schedule Cs, which are, if you've got a small business, they're not always an individual. They don't always have a standalone return. So if you look at it that way, I'm probably closer to 70% that has some sort of business part entwined in it. But very comfortable with, the personal partnerships, S Corp returns, do quite a few of those. I'm actually going to do between 70 and 80 returns this year. And like I said, I was hoping to hit 100 in 5 years. And I've already got 8 or 10 people in the queue for next year, so I'll probably hit my 100 by year 3. So
there you go. What don't you do?
There's nothing. I won't say anything that I don't do. I typically on I'm trying to think. Some of the trust returns and stuff, I'll refer those out.
Okay.
There's certain things, along those lines. Trust, usually it's much better to go through a trust lawyer and just have those done that way. There's some, charities and nonprofits that, depending on what it is, I've done them. It's not my front runner. So depending on what it is, but I'm happy to look at anything, and if I don't do it, I'm happy to refer you to someone who does.
I mean, what about the guy who basically just works a 9 to 5, has a salaried position, no write-offs? I mean, is that a client that's a good fit for you?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, anybody who wants to utilize that, again, if it's a very simple W-2 and, you may be better off just doing TurboTax, right?
Yeah.
But if you've got
that's a good question, I guess, that many people want to know. Like, if I am just a basic is TurboTax is that a good fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And I run into a lot of people that use the H&R Block and all the little box shops that pop up in Walmart.
$95 will do your return.
Well, 95 to start, and then every form adds a fee to it. And a lot of times, I'll get people that have used H&R Block or one of the other, Tax Doctor or whatever, and you look at it and it'll be like they paid this much last year, and it's like I'm less, and it's basically you're walking in and having somebody that knows very basic stuff just to do data entry for you, which it's really not a lot different than TurboTax, right? So I mean, it's but yeah, it's one of those things. It looks cheap on the surface, but once you start adding in all the fees for every form and every little item that they have to add on, it adds up pretty quickly. So,
well, again, this was one of my exciting meetings because I selfishly had so many things that I wanted to ask you that I think are beneficial to my podcast, to my clients, and one of them is mortgage interest and the write-off that comes along with that. We talk a lot about home ownership and the importance of home ownership, obviously with the equity that's associated with it, building wealth, and then there's a tax write-off that comes along with owning a home. And so can you speak a little bit to what the benefits of owning a home with the taxes and with the insurance write-offs and how that can benefit you more than renting?
Oh, sure. The mortgage interest is really the big one now that they've capped the property taxes, right? Okay. So all your tax write-offs cap at $10K. So in this town, there's a lot of people paying more than that just in property tax, right? Yeah. And that used to be the big benefit for itemizing was the property tax write-off. But now with the caps that have been put in place for that, the interest is actually more beneficial than the tax write-off, the property tax write-off. Wow. So
I could see that. I mean, again, you're on a $500,000 property. I mean, right now you're paying $25,000, $30,000 a year. And so how does that work? For somebody who doesn't really understand taxes, I mean, what is the benefit dollar for dollar to me to have this write-off opposed to renting where if I make $100,000 a year and I rent at, say, $2,500 a month, opposed to purchasing a home and having a mortgage payment of $2,500 a month. I mean, what's in it for me?
Yeah. So, once you cross the threshold of the standard deduction, then every dollar that you have on that Form A is basically going to save you 20 to 25%. So,
On the dollar.
yeah.
Right.
So, so that's where, you cap out at 10K on property tax. If you're a married couple, then you're going to need about 16,000 in interest, and that'll put you over the threshold.
Which is pretty easy. I mean, that's right now about a $350,000 to $400,000 home, especially in your first few years, because it's front loaded with interest.
Right. So that puts you over. So then anything you do for charitable donations or anything else that adds to that form is basically going to save you 25 cents on the dollar. So
sounds like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people are always forgetting about. They think that they're saving so much money by renting, and they don't want to deal with any of the home ownership. And depending on how much you make, it can save you a ton of money with all of the write-offs that are associated.
Yeah,
with the
so
interest.
it's definitely an offset, right? So it definitely helps on that total tax picture and stuff, because otherwise you're taking a standard deduction, and it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and so for those that are out there, I mean, what I've been doing with a lot of so Lee and I are in a networking group together, and I've been blindsiding a lot of these members with this podcast, because I've had a few of them that once I tell them I want to sit down and do a podcast, they feel like they need to research and they need to like do something that is different than what we're doing right now. And the whole idea is, me asking questions that not only I want the answer to, but a lot of other people do, and answering them organically is really what people want.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So with that being said, I mean, I've kind of gotten the majority of everything that I want. I mean, what is a tax guy or a business developer? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I keep forgetting. You don't do just taxes.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So we started off by explaining, like, my partner and I started an LLC, which you set up for us.
Correct.
Which is another thing that Lee does. And then what other, what other services do you provide to your clients outside of taxes and setting up small business licenses and things like that?
So, I mean, it all kind of goes hand in hand. So with the taxes, I'm also, if you've got an entity like an LLC, we're also going to evaluate that on an annual basis and see what the best tax strategy is for that. Because adding an S-Corp designation to your LLC can be a big tax saving advantage and stuff too. So there's, timing and trigger points and income levels that are all going to say when it's best to add that. Because there are stipulations that go with that designation as well. So you've got to be prepared to add those items to your routine business life as well. So that's something we look at, routinely. So helping people set up their LLCs, at that time, I sit there and have the discussion with them and what we're looking for and when there'll be appropriate times to make changes and things like that. In addition to that, my baseline business actually started as bookkeeping. So, I love my clients that I keep their books and do their taxes because I don't have to chase them as much for items.
I bet.
And I have a much better understanding of what they've got going on, so it makes it really easy. But both are completely separate. I keep books for people that use somebody else for taxes. I do taxes for people that use somebody else to keep their books. So I'm very open to any of that. It's not a do everything or do nothing kind of item. It's I'll help you wherever you want the help. So
how often do you run into business owners that are currently keeping their own books while running a business, probably doing a somewhat of a crappy job at it, and then you come in from like a consultative type of approach and say, listen, I can help you with your books. I'm already doing your taxes. And they kind of look back and go, I should have done this a lot sooner.
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit of them. I mean, because it's extension time, right? So a lot of people that I'm still chasing are business owners that don't keep a formal set of books, and so they're trying to put their summaries together. They're going back through a year's worth of bank statements, trying to figure things out, and things like that. Some of them, I get 12 bank statements with items highlighted, and it's like that's fine. I'll work with that. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of extra time and extra fees to comb through stuff. But, so I work with all levels, and I try to talk to them, and a lot of them are like, it's just a side business. I don't want to put formal books in place. I don't want a monthly, fee, things like that. So, and that's understandable, and I'm willing to work with people like that. But the ones that take the time to organize it and keep their books up, it's just a much simpler time when it comes to tax time. And
I would just envision, because I deal with a lot of small business owners when they're getting their loans done and everything. And a lot of times I'll contact their CPA to get some of the documentation that we need. And I think a lot of people don't think about the time that's associated with keeping their own books and the stress that's associated with it. And I think a lot of people just assume that hiring a bookkeeper is going to it's not going to be worth what they're paying.
Right.
And so they think that they're saving money by doing it, but then they're scrambling at the end of the year. They're not organized with the documentation that they have. Or even if they are, is it debatable that as a business owner, your time might be better spent earning money instead of figuring out ways to handle your taxes and keep your books?
And I've never had anybody that started bookkeeping services that has wanted to take it back.
I bet. I don't do my own bookkeeping. I know that.
So I think, once you truly experience it, then you realize the value that's built into it.
Is there this is like the public service announcement to those small business owners and entrepreneurs that are out there. Like, is there kind of like a gross revenue threshold that you feel, you see the numbers, right, where it becomes worthwhile? So in other words, like, if I'm watching this right now and I'm a business owner and I'm like, you know what, my gross revenue's only, I'm just throwing a number out there, it's only $50,000 a year gross, right?
Right.
Is it worth thinking about a bookkeeper, or is it $100,000? Is it $250,000? Like, when does it become like hey man, this makes no sense for you to be doing this?
Yeah. Probably closer to the 100K mark.
Okay.
If you're under that, a lot of times it's still just a Schedule C kind of item, and if you don't have the revenue coming in, you're not going to be spending the money, so you've just got a lower level of transactions and stuff. If you're dealing in $1 items, you could still have a lot of transactions at 50K, and then it makes sense to at least have some sort of system in place that's doing some of the capturing for you. That may be, one of your sales systems that has some good reports or something like that. If you invest in that instead of the bookkeeping, sometimes that'll work out for you as well.
I think about my real estate agents. That's the majority of my guests, and there's a few of them, a good handful that are doing well over $100,000 a year in gross commissions. And I don't think that they think about it where they've got CRMs that they're paying for monthly. They've got they're doing gifts, they're doing birthdays, they're photos. There's a ton of expenses that are associated with it. And I can tell you right now, the majority of the real estate agents that I communicate with are doing all of that on their own, are not utilizing a bookkeeper. And what's interesting about it is they're always the ones that are extending their taxes and, figuring out like what they're going to do when it comes time to pay and all this other stuff. And so there's the public service announcement, guys. If you're doing gross commissions over 6 figures, it might not be a bad idea to contact somebody that's going to help you do your books.
Yeah. Well, and you're just a lot less likely to miss items,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because everybody, that's one of the areas that people like to procrastinate in. So then it's scrambling backwards to remember where you spent everything versus, capturing it fresh up front.
And then just to kind of like, give an idea of what it looks like. So somebody has an expense. I mean, are they able to just put that in a folder and just monthly, forward that over to you? Do you prefer monthly? Do you prefer quarterly? Do you want receipts every day?
Yeah. I typically work on a monthly basis.
Okay.
Some of my smaller clients and smaller business, I'll do a discounted rate and do a quarterly update instead of a monthly update. But typically monthly because bank statements come out monthly, things like that. So it's easier just to keep on top of it on a monthly basis
for everybody.
So,
right. Not just the client, but for you.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what do you need to know from a loan officer, man? I've selfishly just sucked the information from you. So what do you need from me?
Realistically, I love it when people come to you. Because that's usually when they come to me for help because you need the numbers.
Yeah, that's true. I can't tell you how many times people come to me and then they're like, oh, yeah, I want to get my deal done. And they send over their returns. And I'm like, well, I'm going to need the 2022 returns now because they're due. Yeah. Have you filed an extension? And that's the other thing. People think that because the extension date is in October that they don't need to file an extension. I see that all the time. So there's my public service announcement. Just because the IRS gives you an extension opportunity, if you don't file for extension, it doesn't mean anything.
Correct. Yeah.
So you still have to file. You just have to file an extension.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of them go hand in hand. So you file, if you have a business return that gets extended, then your personal gets extended, then your franchise tax gets extended. So, and all of those, your tax professional will take care of all of those together. So
Well, it's funny because everybody says, I hate paying taxes and I don't want to deal with it. But I think about it the opposite way. I like paying my taxes and being done with it.
Yeah.
Because I think what's the age old line? The two things that are guaranteed is death and taxes.
Correct.
So deferring taxes to me, I never understood it. So I'm glad you've
Yeah.
dispelled this. I thought maybe there's some hack that I don't know about, where I'm screwing up with the extensions and stuff. But I'm always trying to get mine done as soon as I can.
yeah, and have good conversations with your tax professional. You want to be comfortable with the numbers you've got in front of you and make sure that, we all have to pay the taxes, but don't pay more than you have to pay.
Mm-hmm. So at what time for me as a lender I know that when someone hasn't had their taxes completed, is there anything I'm missing with, my potential clients? I think a lot of it is going to be self-employed business owners that really need a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
I closed a deal for a couple that both of them were self-employed just a couple weeks ago. And one of them is definitely an example of somebody who I feel like this would really, really benefit you.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to start having those conversations with, because one of the things that a lot of people don't know, we started this during COVID. Self-employed business owners, we used to have to get, the last 2 years' tax returns.
Right.
That's always been the thing. But now what we're required to supply is a year-to-date P&L. So,
Yeah.
I'd say 60 to 70% of business owners that are operating self-employed, when I ask them for their 2023 P&L,
Yeah.
they look at me like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then when I'm like, well, do you have a CPA that, does oh yeah, we do. Does he do any bookkeeping? Nope. And I'm like, so now we're doing like a profit and loss. We're already 10 months into the year.
Yeah.
And I'm walking these business owners through a profit and loss and what that looks like. Yeah. So there's another public service announcement to self-employed business owners. When you go to purchase a home, they're going to ask for a year-to-date profit and loss.
Right.
And you're going to need to provide one.
And
we're going to have to do one.
Right. And the reality is, it's cheaper to keep up with it than to have those situations where you have to go hire somebody to backload 10 months and pull it in, right? Because at an expedited rate, right?
So, I learned that firsthand.
Yeah, so that's going to cost you a lot more than just keeping on top of it from the beginning. And things will be a lot cleaner and a lot smoother too, because, no different than anybody in life. When you're pushed for time and it's rushed and everything else, is it really going to be as accurate as it would have been if it would have just been taken care of in real time?
Well, that's what we tell people in my business, is that the hardest time to get a loan is when you need a loan.
Yeah.
And I would envision the hardest time to get your taxes done is when you need to get your taxes done.
Yeah.
You're up against the deadline.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, because, the queues build up. I mean, I operate pretty much on a first come, first serve. So it's like, I send out the emails to everybody on the same day, but it's like whoever gets your information in first is going to be on the list first, and they're going to be ones taken care of. And, after certain dates, it's like I'll do my best to get you done by the deadline, but after certain dates, there's just no guarantee. It just depends how stacked up it becomes in front of you.
Gotcha. Well, what else do you need from me, Lee? What can I answer for you? Anything you need to know?
Let me see.
You can say no, man. It's all good. We got a lot of good content here. We're going to put it together. My boy Michael Beltran from Flash Media Marketing is going to, get this clip out and chop it up and make it look sexy. And you answered a ton of questions that I get on a regular basis from people that, are currently in the process of buying a home. Yeah. But these are questions that I get all the time when I'm out and about and all of that. And I think there are a lot of things that there is a lot of misconception on due to, just unqualified people giving advice.
Yeah, and with the internet, there's just more and more unqualified advice out there, not just in this, but in everything in life, right? So you've got to really, take everything that you come across with a little bit of a grain of salt and, talk to the people that really know. One thing I will throw in there is I always offer a 100% free initial consult for an hour. Anybody that wants to sit down and talk, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, good to know.
And I'm not the type that is going to, nickel and dime and charge you for every email or phone call or anything like that. If we do any bookkeeping work or tax work, my fees are all inclusive. I don't. You don't get any adders on it or anything that's going to surprise you. So.
Very cool. Well, I've been ending all of these doing the exact same thing where I have the guest kind of look into their camera, give us your elevator pitch, let us know who you are, what you do, anything else you want to cover, and then we'll we'll call it, man. But make sure
Okay.
you look at the camera. Don't look at me because I've
Okay.
seen people do that.
I'm not much of a pitch guy. I'm here to help small business owners to medium business owners. Anything from bookkeeping to entity setup and strategies and tax preparation.
There it is. Lee Harmon, give him a call. Free consultation, all of it. I love it. Appreciate you coming on, and I'm glad that you you handled being blindsided for a podcast.
It was a pleasure. Thank you much.
Nice work.
So.